He always believed that their love was strong and their marriage honest. But in the last moments of her life, his wife confessed what she had been hiding all her life. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching us from. The year was 1961, in an America still shackled by the heavy chains of segregation. Jim Crow laws dictated where a man like Elijah Johnson could walk, sit, or even dare to look. Interracial relationships were not merely frowned upon. They were a spark in a tinderbox, a dangerous transgression that could ignite violent retribution. In the South especially, a black man caught in a compromising position with a white woman risked brutal, often fatal consequences. The North, while less overtly hostile, was far from a haven. Prejudice ran deep, etched into the very fabric of society. Elijah had learned to navigate this treacherous landscape from a young age. Born into poverty in a small Alabama town, he had grown up watching his father and uncles bent beneath the yoke of oppression, their backs breaking under the weight of a system designed to keep them in their place. His mother, worn down by years of toil, spent more time scrubbing floors in white folks' homes than tending to her own. Elijah had started working as soon as he was old enough to hold a wrench, his nimble fingers learning the intricacies of engines alongside his older relatives in the makeshift garage behind their ramshackle house. By the time he turned 18, Elijah had secured a coveted position at the local auto shop, one of the few places where a black man could earn an honest living without constant supervision from a white boss. He was tall and lean, with skin the rich color of polished mahogany and eyes that seemed to see right through a person. There was a quiet intensity about him, a self-possession that made white men uneasy and drew the gaze of white women, a dangerous combination in the world he inhabited. But Elijah had never been foolish enough to court such trouble, keenly aware of the risks that came with any interaction that crossed color lines. That is, until he met Catherine Fairchild. Catherine's upbringing could not have been more different from Elijah's. Born into a life of privilege, she had wanted for nothing materially. Her childhood had been a whirlwind of etiquette lessons, piano recitals, and elaborate tea parties, all designed to mold her into the perfect Southern belle. Her father, Henry Fairchild, was a man of considerable influence, a pillar of the community whose wealth and status afforded him a level of power that few could match. He believed fiercely in the importance of lineage, in the sanctity of his family's blue blood, and he had made it his mission to ensure that his only daughter married well, to someone of their own kind. But Catherine had always felt suffocated by the narrow confines of her gilded cage. Curious and headstrong, with a rebellious streak that often landed her in trouble, she chafed under the weight of her father's expectations. She dreamed of a life beyond the manicured lawns and stifling social niceties of her parents' world, a life where she was free to make her own choices and chase her own desires. The night she first laid eyes on Elijah, at a clandestine jazz club where the rules of segregation seemed to melt away in the haze of cigarette smoke and pulsing music, something shifted inside her. She watched him from across the room, transfixed by the way he moved, the way he seemed so at ease in his own skin despite the tension that crackled in the air. When their eyes met, it was like a jolt of electricity, a recognition of kindred spirits. They talked for hours that night, huddled in a corner of the club, their words tumbling out in a rush of mutual excitement. Catherine was fascinated by Elijah's perspective, by the way he saw the world so differently from anyone she had ever known. He spoke of injustice and struggle, of dreams deferred and hopes kept alive in the face of overwhelming odds. She hung on his every word, feeling as though she was glimpsing a reality that had always been hidden from her. Elijah, for his part, was wary at first, acutely aware of the danger that came with even talking to a white woman in public. But there was something about Catherine's earnestness, the way she listened so intently and asked questions that cut right to the heart of things, that drew him in despite his reservations. By the time the night was over, they both knew that this was just the beginning. They began meeting in secret, stealing moments together whenever they could. It was thrilling at first, the rush of forbidden connection, the sense that they were part of something bigger than themselves. But reality came crashing down the night Catherine's father caught them together. It was late, and they had been careless, lingering too long in each other's company. They were just saying goodbye, Elijah's hand brushing against Catherine's in the shadows of the alleyway behind the club, when Henry Fairchild rounded the corner. For a moment, he just stood there, his face white with shock and rage, his eyes darting between his daughter and the black man who stood too close to her. Then he exploded. Later, Catherine would only remember bits and pieces of what followed. Her father's roar of fury, the crack of his palm against her cheek, the way Elijah had stepped forward as if to shield her, only to be yanked back by the iron grip of her father's men. She remembered being dragged away, her feet barely touching the ground, her voice hoarse from screaming, and she remembered the last glimpse she caught of Elijah's face, the fear and helplessness etched into his features as he watched her disappear into the night. In the days that followed, Catherine was kept under lock and key, forbidden from leaving the house or communicating with anyone outside the family. Her father ranted and raved, his anger a living, breathing thing that seemed to fill every corner of their grand home. He spoke of shame and disgrace, of the ruin she had almost brought down on all of them. He vowed that she would never see that boy again, that he would make sure of it. But Catherine was not so easily cowed. She had tasted freedom, had seen a glimpse of a world beyond the suffocating confines of her own, and she was not willing to let it go without a fight. She snuck out of the house whenever she could, leaving notes for Elijah in their secret spots, desperate for any sign that he was still out there, still thinking of her. Weeks passed with no word, and Catherine began to lose hope. She knew the risks Elijah would be taking by trying to contact her, knew the price he could pay if they were caught again. Part of her wanted him to stay away, to save himself, even as another part yearned for him with an intensity that frightened her. And then, finally, a message came, not in person, but through a network of whispers and passed notes, a clandestine system of communication that the black community had long used to survive in a world that sought to silence them. The note was brief, just a few hastily scrawled lines, but it was enough. "Meet me at the old barn. Midnight. Come alone." Catherine's heart raced as she read and reread the words, hardly daring to believe they were real. She knew the barn he meant, an abandoned structure on the edge of town that they had sometimes used as a meeting place. She also knew the risks of sneaking out, of defying her father's orders so blatantly. But in that moment, none of it mattered. All that mattered was seeing Elijah again, hearing his voice, feeling the reassuring warmth of his presence. That night, she slipped out of her bedroom window, her steps light and quick as she made her way through the sleeping town. Her heart hammered in her chest as she approached the barn, half expecting to find her father's men waiting to drag her back home. But when she pushed open the creaky door and stepped inside, there was only Elijah, his face etched with relief and longing. They came together in a rush, arms encircling each other, breath mingling in the cool night air. For a long moment, they just held on, both trembling with the force of their emotions. Then Elijah drew back, his hands coming up to frame Catherine's face. "We can't stay here," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Your father, he's not going to stop. He'll never let us be together." Catherine nodded, blinking back tears. She had known this deep down, had understood the impossibility of their situation. But hearing Elijah say it out loud made it real in a way that was both terrifying and strangely liberating. "Then we'll leave," she said, the words coming out in a rush. "We'll go somewhere, anywhere. Start a new life. Just you and me." Elijah hesitated, fear and doubt warring in his eyes. He knew better than anyone the dangers that faced a mixed-race couple in America, the hatred and violence they would be up against no matter where they went. But looking at Catherine, seeing the fierce determination in her gaze, the unwavering love and trust, he knew he could not walk away from this. From her. "It won't be easy," he warned, even as he drew her closer. "We'll be starting from scratch with nothing but each other. And there's no guarantee of safety, no matter how far we run." "I know," Catherine said, her voice steady, "but I'd rather face whatever comes with you by my side than spend another day without you. I love you, Elijah, and I choose you, come what may." In the end, it was as simple and as complicated as that. They made their plans in whispers, mapping out a route that would take them north, to a city where they hoped they might have a chance of building a life together. They gathered what little money they had, pooled their resources and their courage, and on a moonless night, they ran. It was a journey fraught with danger and uncertainty, every mile they traveled taking them further from the only lives they had ever known. They slept huddled together on bus station benches and in the backs of rumbling trucks, always looking over their shoulders, always half expecting to see Catherine's father or his hired men looming out of the shadows. But they kept moving, driven by a fierce, desperate hope that somewhere, somehow, they might find a place to call home. When they finally reached their destination, a gritty industrial town on the outskirts of Chicago, they were bone-tired and nearly broke, but they were together. They found a room in a rundown boarding house, a cramped, dingy space that was a far cry from the grand mansions of Catherine's youth. But it was theirs. Elijah took a job at the local steel mill, working long, grueling shifts in the blistering heat, while Catherine found work as a seamstress in a garment factory, her once soft hands quickly becoming calloused and pricked with needle scars. Life was hard in those early years, a constant struggle to keep food on the table and a roof over their heads. The specter of racism was never far, even in the supposedly more progressive North, and they faced daily reminders of the world's intolerance and cruelty. But they had each other, and that was enough. They got married in a small, nondescript ceremony at the local courthouse, just the two of them and a pair of strangers as witnesses. Catherine wore a simple cotton dress, Elijah his best and only suit. They exchanged vows and rings, promising to love and cherish each other for better or worse, in sickness and in health, forsaking all others. And as they walked out into the weak autumn sunlight, hands clasped tightly, they both knew that they had already weathered worse, and that their love was the kind that could endure any storm. The years passed and their family grew. First came a son, Jeremiah. His skin a perfect blend of his parents' hues, his eyes bright with curiosity and mischief. He was the center of their world, the living embodiment of their love and their hopes for the future. Catherine would spend hours just watching him, marveling at the miracle of his existence, the way he seemed to make everything they had been through worthwhile. But even as she reveled in the joys of motherhood, Catherine was haunted by a secret, a ghost from her past that she had never been able to put to rest. For years before she met Elijah, before she had found the courage to break free from her father's world, she had borne another child, a son given up in a haze of fear and shame. She had been young, barely more than a child herself, when she had discovered the pregnancy. Her parents, horrified at the prospect of a scandal, had hidden her away, concocting a story about a sudden illness that required a lengthy convalescence. Catherine had spent months sequestered in a distant relative's home, her body changing and her heart breaking as she grappled with the knowledge of the life growing inside her. When the baby came, a tiny, perfect thing with a shock of dark hair and eyes that seemed to hold all the world's sorrows, Catherine had barely been allowed to hold him. Her parents had already made arrangements, had found a wealthy, childless couple who were willing to take the baby and raise him as their own. Catherine had pleaded and wept, had begged for just a little more time, but her father had been implacable. The child was whisked away, and Catherine was left with nothing but a gaping hole in her heart and a secret that would gnaw at her for years to come. She had never told Elijah about the child, had locked that part of her life away in a deep, dark corner of her mind. But now, holding her own son in her arms, watching him grow and thrive, the old wound seemed to throb with renewed pain. She found herself wondering about her firstborn, picturing him in another woman's arms, imagining the life he might be living. The guilt was a constant ache, a shadow that dimmed even the brightest moments of her new life. As the years went on, as their family expanded to include a daughter, Lily, as bright and fierce as her brother, Catherine tried to push the past away, to focus on the blessings of her present. But the secret weighed on her, growing heavier with each passing day. She knew, deep down, that she could not carry it forever, that the truth would have to come out eventually. But the thought of facing Elijah, of seeing the hurt and betrayal in his eyes, was more than she could bear. And then the letter came. It arrived on a seemingly ordinary day, mixed in with the usual bills and advertisements. Catherine almost missed it at first, her eyes skimming over the unfamiliar handwriting and the lack of a return address. But something made her pause, made her take a closer look. And as she read the short, cryptic message inside, her world tilted on its axis. I know what you did. I know about the child. And I'm going to make sure everyone else knows, too. There was no signature, no clue as to the sender's identity. But Catherine knew with a sickening certainty that her past had finally caught up with her. The carefully constructed facade of her life, the fragile piece she had worked so hard to build, was about to come crashing down around her. She didn't tell Elijah at first, couldn't bring herself to shatter the illusion of the life they had built together. She tucked the letter away, tried to go on as if nothing had changed. But the knowledge of what was coming, the fear of the inevitable confrontation, ate away at her. She grew distant, distracted, prone to long silences and sudden tearful outbursts. Elijah, always attuned to her moods, noticed the change, but she brushed off his concerns, telling him it was just the stress of work, of raising two young children in a world that seemed to grow more uncertain by the day. But she could not hide forever. The second letter came a week later, more explicit in its threats. The sender claimed to have proof, to be ready to go public with the story of Catherine's shame. They demanded money, a fortune in exchange for their silence. Catherine knew she could not pay, that even if she had the means, giving in to blackmail would only lead to more demands, more threats. She had to come clean, had to face the consequences of her actions, no matter how painful they might be. She chose a quiet evening, after the children were in bed, to finally tell Elijah the truth. They sat at the kitchen table, a pot of tea growing cold between them, as Catherine poured out the story of her past, of the child she had borne and given up, of the guilt and regret that had haunted her ever since. She watched Elijah's face as she spoke, saw the shock and disbelief give way to a deep, wounding hurt. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "All these years, carrying this alone, did you not trust me? Did you think I would love you less?" "No," Catherine said, tears streaming down her face. "No, it was never that. I couldn't bear the thought of hurting you, of tainting what we have with my shame. I wanted to be the woman you deserved, the woman I thought you saw when you looked at me." Elijah was silent for a long moment, his gaze distant. When he finally spoke, his words were measured, carefully chosen. "What we have," he said, "is built on truth, on knowing each other fully and completely. I love you, Catherine, all of you, including the parts you're ashamed of. I just wish you had trusted me enough to share this burden." Catherine reached for his hand, her fingers trembling. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. For not telling you, for letting my fear come between us. But I'm telling you now. And I'll face whatever comes next, as long as you're by my side." Elijah's hand tightened around hers, a silent promise. They sat there for a long time, talking, crying, the secrets of the past finally laid bare. And though the road ahead was uncertain, though they knew there would be challenges and pain to come, they faced it as they had everything else. Together. The confrontation, when it came, was every bit as ugly as Catherine had feared. The blackmailer, a former servant from her parents' household who had witnessed her pregnancy and the child's birth, had made good on their threats. The story spread like wildfire, whispered behind hands and printed in lurid headlines. Catherine's father, still a powerful man despite the years, did his best to quash the rumors, but the damage was done. Catherine and Elijah found themselves ostracized, shunned by the very community they had worked so hard to build a place in. Friends turned away, neighbors crossed the street to avoid them. At work, Catherine faced daily humiliations, snide comments and outright hostility from her fellow factory workers. Even Elijah, always so strong and steady, seemed to buckle under the weight of the constant judgment and disdain. But they held fast to each other, drawing strength from their love and their shared determination to weather the storm. They explained the situation to their children as best they could, shielding them from the worst of the backlash while also teaching them the importance of honesty, of owning one's truths no matter how painful. And then, just when it seemed that things could get no worse, Catherine fell ill. It started as a simple cough, a tightness in her chest that she attributed to the long hours at the factory. But as the weeks passed, her condition only worsened. She grew pale and thin, her breath coming in short, painful gasps. Elijah, terrified, begged her to see a doctor, but Catherine resisted, insisting that she just needed rest, that she would be fine. She was not fine. One morning, Elijah found her collapsed on the kitchen floor, her lips tinged blue, her pulse weak and thready. He carried her to the hospital himself, praying all the way that he was not too late. The diagnosis, when it came, was devastating. Tuberculosis, advanced and aggressive. The doctors gave Catherine a matter of months, a year at most. They spoke of sanatoriums, of radical treatments that might buy her a little more time, but Catherine refused. She wanted to be at home, with her family, for whatever time she had left. Elijah brought her home, set up a sickbed in their room. He tended to her day and night, barely sleeping, barely eating. The children pitched in where they could, bringing their mother cool cloths for her fever, reading to her from her favorite books. But as the weeks passed, as Catherine grew weaker and weaker, it became clear that no amount of love or care could stop the inevitable. One evening, as the sun dipped low in the sky and the light in the room turned golden and soft, Catherine called Elijah to her side. Her voice was barely a whisper, her once vibrant eyes dulled by pain and fatigue. But her grip on Elijah's hand was strong, urgent. "There's something I need to tell you," she breathed. "Something I should have said a long time ago." Elijah leaned closer, his heart clenching at the sorrow and regret in her voice. "What is it, my love? You can tell me anything." Catherine smiled, a weak, watery thing. "I know that now," she said. "I just wish I had known it sooner. Elijah, when I married you, it wasn't just about love. It was about escape, about finding a way out of the life I was trapped in. I did love you, truly and deeply, but part of me was also just running away." Elijah felt a jolt of pain, of sorrow and confusion, but he did not pull away, did not let go of her hand. "I understand," he said softly. "We were both running in our own ways, running towards each other, towards a future we couldn't see but desperately wanted to believe in." Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Sorry for not being honest, for not trusting you with all of myself. But I need you to know, Elijah, that loving you, building a life with you, is the best thing I've ever done, the truest thing, and I wouldn't trade a single moment, not for anything." Elijah gathered her into his arms, holding her close as she wept. "I know," he murmured into her hair. "I know, my love, and I wouldn't trade it either. Not a single heartbeat." They stayed like that for a long time, clinging to each other as the light faded and the shadows grew long. And when Catherine finally slipped away, her breath leaving her body in a soft, peaceful sigh, Elijah knew that she had gone with a heart unburdened, with the certainty of his love and forgiveness. The grief, when it came, was a wild, howling thing. Elijah felt as though a part of himself had been ripped away, leaving nothing but a raw, gaping wound. He moved through the days in a haze, going through the motions of work and parenting, but feeling as though he was only half alive. The children, too, were lost in their sorrow, their young faces etched with a pain no child should know. But even in the depths of their grief, they had each other. They clung together, a small, battered ship in a stormy sea, anchored by their love for Catherine and for each other. Slowly, painfully, they began to heal, to find their way back to something resembling life. And then, one day, a letter arrived. It was addressed to Catherine, the handwriting achingly familiar. With trembling hands, Elijah opened it, his heart racing as he read the words inside. "My dear Catherine," it began, "I hope this letter finds you well. I know it's been many years, and I have no right to intrude on your life after all this time. But I recently learned of your situation, of the secret you've carried for so long, and I felt compelled to reach out, to offer what little comfort I can. The child you gave birth to, the child you entrusted to our care, he is well, he is loved. We named him James after my father, and he has grown into a fine young man. He knows of you, knows that he was adopted, and he has always wondered about his birth mother. I have told him what little I know, but I have always respected your privacy, your wish to keep the past in the past. But now, knowing what you have endured, the pain and the sorrow, I feel that he deserves to know the truth. And so I am writing to you, to ask your permission to tell him about you, about the circumstances of his birth. I would never presume to do so without your blessing, but I believe that he has a right to know where he comes from, to understand the love and the sacrifice that brought him into this world. I know that this may be difficult for you, that it may bring up old wounds and painful memories, but please know that you have nothing to be ashamed of, nothing to hide. You made a choice, a brave and selfless choice, and you gave your child a chance at a good life. That is something to be proud of, something to hold on to. If you're willing, I would like to arrange a meeting, a chance for James to know you and for you to know him. But if you prefer to keep your distance, to let the past remain where it is, I will respect that too. The choice is yours and yours alone. With deepest sympathies and warmest regards, Margaret Sinclair. Elijah read the letter again and again, his heart swelling with a mixture of grief and gratitude. He knew that Catherine would have wanted this, would have wanted to know her son, to see the man he had become. And he knew that he owed it to her, to himself, to see this journey through to its end. He wrote back to Margaret that very day, expressing his sorrow at Catherine's passing, but also his deep appreciation for her reaching out. He told her of Catherine's final days, of the peace she had found in the truth, and of his own desire to honor her wishes. He asked if James might be willing to meet with him, to learn about the mother he had never known and the family that had loved her so deeply. A month later, on a crisp autumn day, Elijah found himself sitting in a quiet cafe, his heart pounding as he waited for the son his wife had lost so long ago. When the door finally opened and a tall, handsome young man walked in, Elijah felt his breath catch in his throat. He looked so much like Catherine, with her high cheekbones and her clear, searching eyes. For a long moment, they just stared at each other, two strangers bound by a shared love and a shared loss. Then James stepped forward, his hand outstretched, his voice soft and uncertain. "Mr. Johnson," he said. "I'm James. James Sinclair. It's good to meet you." Elijah rose to his feet, clasping the young man's hand in his own. "James," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Your mother. She would have been so proud of you, so happy to know you." They talked for hours, exchanging stories and memories, laughter and tears. Elijah told James of Catherine's courage, her kindness, the way she had loved with her whole heart. James, in turn, spoke of his childhood, his adoptive parents, the questions he had always carried about his origins. By the time they parted, with promises to stay in touch and plans for James to meet his half-siblings, Elijah felt a sense of peace, of closure, that he hadn't known he needed. Life went on as it always does. The pain of Catherine's loss never fully faded, but it softened, became a part of the fabric of their lives rather than a gaping wound. Elijah watched his children grow and thrive, saw in them the best parts of their mother, Jeremiah's quiet strength, Lily's fierce compassion, and he held fast to the memory of Catherine, to the love they had shared and the life they had built, knowing that it was a legacy that would endure long after he was gone. Years later, as Elijah lay on his own deathbed, his children and grandchildren gathered around him. He found his thoughts turning to Catherine, to the woman who had changed his life in so many ways. He thought of their first meeting, the spark of connection that had flared between them, the love that had grown and deepened with every passing year. He thought of the challenges they had faced, the secrets and the sorrows, and how they had come through it all together, stronger and more certain of each other than ever. And as he closed his eyes for the last time, Elijah knew that he was a lucky man. Lucky to have loved and been loved so deeply, so truly. Lucky to have built a life and a family with a woman of such courage and grace. Lucky to have had Catherine, in all her imperfect, beautiful humanity, by his side through it all. The house was too quiet, the kind of quiet that settled into the walls, into the space between breaths, and the weight of a body that would never rise again. Sarah was gone, and Oliver sat in the silence of their bedroom, staring at the empty space beside him, at the pillow that still held the faintest imprint of her head. For days, he had not moved it, as if by leaving it untouched he could trick himself into believing she was still there. But the truth was inescapable. She was gone, and she had left him with a lifetime of secrets. Her confession had broken something inside him, not because she had lied, but because he had never truly suspected. For all the years they had spent together, for all the moments they had shared, he had believed in her, believed that their love had always been real, that it had been built on trust, not necessity. And now he didn't know what to believe. Had their life been a lie? Had she ever really chosen him, or had he only ever been an escape, a refuge, a way out of a life she did not want? He had spent his whole life fighting to be seen as a man in a world that called him less than that, told him he was never enough. And now, even in the place he had called home, even in the arms of the woman he had loved, he questioned whether he had ever truly belonged. The letters were still there, the ones from her father, yellowed with age, tucked away in the drawer where she had hidden them. The threats, the warnings, and then the last one, the one that had shattered her in those final weeks. "I know who you are." A different handwriting, a different fear. She had never told him what it meant, but now he had to know. He opened the drawer, his fingers shaking as he pulled out the stack of old papers, unfolding them one by one. The last letter was brief, a single sentence. "Your son is looking for you." Oliver froze. The room tilted. He read the words again, his breath catching in his throat. Their son, not Isaac, not Margaret. The one she had given away, the one he had never known existed. His hands tightened around the paper. There had been another child, another piece of her that she had kept from him, a son who had been out there searching for answers. And now she was gone, and all that was left were questions that could never be answered. Oliver sat in the silence, staring at the letter, at the truth of a life he had never truly known. And for the first time since Sarah's death, he let himself grieve, not just for her, but for the life they had built, a life he had thought was real, a life he now realized had been filled with ghosts. Felt different without her. It wasn't just the emptiness, the absence of her voice, the quiet rustling of her movements as she folded clothes or hummed to herself in the kitchen. It was something deeper. It was the weight of all the things left unsaid. Oliver had spent decades believing he understood his wife, believing that the love they had built was real, unshakable. Now, in the days following her death, that belief was crumbling like sand slipping through his fingers. He sat at the kitchen table, the letter in front of him. "Your son is looking for you." The words felt like a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. Sarah had been carrying this truth for years. She had let it fester inside her, let it eat away at her, and she had never told him. Oliver clenched his fists, staring at the faded ink. How could she? How could she sit across from him at the dinner table every night knowing she had another child in the world? How could she watch their children grow and never once speak his name? Had she planned to take this secret to the grave? She had confessed so much before she died. The money, the doubts, the fact that she had not married him for love, at least not at first. But this she had kept, and now Oliver was left to deal with it alone. Isaac and Margaret didn't understand. They were grieving too, but their pain was different. To them, Sarah had been a mother, steady and constant, the center of their world. To Oliver, she had been more. She had been his partner, his home, the woman he had fought for, the woman he had trusted more than anyone else in the world. Now he wasn't sure what had been real and what had been a carefully constructed illusion. Was love still love if it had started as a lie? He didn't know, and he wasn't sure he wanted to find out. Days passed. Oliver worked because it was the only thing that made sense. The steel mill didn't care about grief. It didn't care that his wife was gone, that his world had shifted beneath his feet. It demanded the same thing every day, his sweat, his strength, his time. That at least was simple, but nothing else was. Not when he walked through the market and felt the weight of strangers' eyes on him, their silent questions hanging in the air. Not when he lay in bed at night and reached for her out of habit, only to find the sheets cold and empty. And not when he opened the drawer and saw the letter waiting for him, taunting him with the truth he wasn't sure he was ready to face. One evening, after the children were asleep, he sat at the table and unfolded the letter again. There was no name, no address, just a single brutal fact. A son out there looking for answers, and Oliver was the only one left to give them. He wrestled with it for weeks. What good would it do to look for this boy, this man now? What did he owe a stranger who had never been a part of their lives? But then another thought came. What if it had been Isaac? What if someone had taken his son from him, erased him, made him a secret? Wouldn't he want to know? Wouldn't he deserve to? And so, one morning before the sun had fully risen, Oliver left the house. He walked to the post office, the letter clenched in his hand. For the first time since Sarah's death, he made a decision. He would find this boy. He would give him the truth that had been stolen from him, even if it hurt, even if it changed everything. Because the past had already taken too much, and Oliver wasn't going to let it take anything more. He didn't know where the journey would lead him, didn't know what he would find at the end of it, but he knew that he owed it to Sarah, to the woman she had been before the secrets and the lies, to see it through. He owed it to the child she had carried, the piece of her heart that had been lost for so long. The road ahead would be hard, Oliver knew that. There would be painful truths to confront, old wounds to reopen. But he also knew that there was healing to be found in the truth, in the facing of it, no matter how brutal. Sarah had taught him that, in the end, with her final confession, her final unburdening. As he stood in line at the post office, the letter trembling in his hand, Oliver felt a strange sense of calm settle over him. He was afraid, yes, of what he might learn, of the ways it might change him. But he was also ready to step out of the shadows of the past and into the light of whatever came next. He thought of Sarah, of the strength it must have taken for her to carry this secret for so long, to bear the weight of it alone. He thought of the love they had shared, the life they had built together, and he knew that it had been real, even if it had been imperfect. And he knew that wherever this journey took him, he would carry that love with him, a flame to light the way. When his turn came, Oliver stepped up to the counter, his voice steady as he spoke the words that would set him on a new path. I need to send a letter. It's a matter of great importance. The journey to find his lost son would be unpredictable, Oliver knew. But Sarah's legacy of resilience was within him. The same spirit and tenacity that had driven her to break free of her father's iron clasp a lifetime ago would now fuel his mission. Come what may, he would meet his unknown child with an open mind and open arms, knowing it was what his departed wife would have wished. Through unearthing long-buried truths, however uncomfortable, Oliver hoped he might gain a deeper understanding of his late wife and their enduring love. Though painful chapters of Sarah's history had been hidden, Oliver considered it his duty to pursue this mystery she had left behind. He owed it to all of them, Sarah, their children, and the missing son, to gather the shards of a shattered past and find wholeness in embracing every facet of their shared story. Under the comforting light of her cherished memory, Oliver addressed the envelope in his hands. After a strained inhale, he slid the letter across the counter, sealing his intent to embark on this personal quest for closure. Tucking his hands in his pockets, he strode out of the post office, squinting against the morning sun and its promise of a new path forward. Uneasy but resolute, he knew there was healing to be found on the far side of hard truths. One step at a time, he would get there. For her, for all of them. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe for more. Share this video with your friends and let us know your thoughts in the comments. And if you're looking for more captivating stories, check out our other videos. See you in the next one.